I'm Eric Fingerhut, and this is The Glue, the podcast where we talk about the things that hold our communities together in a world that's so often driving us apart. Today is a special episode of The Glue, as we are recording live at the JPro25 conference in Baltimore, Maryland, in front of a live audience of 1,300 of the most incredible, committed, and talented Jewish professionals that are the glue that hold all of our communities together. We're going to explore with three of these incredible professionals how they think about building community and holding community together in these difficult and fractious times. Please welcome to The Glue, Sarah Freed, the Chief External Affairs Officer at Hillel International. Josh Miller, the Chief Program Officer at the Jim Joseph Foundation. And Miriam Rosenzweig, President and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Milwaukee. Welcome you all. Thank you for joining me. So I want to actually start with the personal, if I can. Would you tell us about your personal Jewish community? You know, as a Jewish professional, we know that it's different in your professional role than in your personal role. Do you find it easier or harder to build a community for yourself and your family? Josh, why don't you start?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us here. As a foundation professional, I get to go to a lot of conferences, as many foundation professionals do, but to be at this one where we get to actually go and participate as fellow Jewish communal professionals is just such a privilege. And yeah, it's interesting in my journey as a professional, I spent the first 15 years of my career actually getting to experience what it's like to be the glue inside a Jewish community. I worked on campus, I worked with young adults, I worked at camp, and it was some of the most meaningful and purpose-filled years of my life, actually, was being just at the center of these incredible communities as a song leader, to be sort of surrounded in song and people's lives and just in it. And it was also a complete blurring of personal and professional, which was powerful and meaningful at the time. And as I grew older, hit different stage of life, became a parent, realized I wanted a different kind of role. So since then, I've been working in a job where I get to kind of do my work at the office and then go home and have Jewish communal life. And we started, our own Chavurah, and we've been celebrating holidays at home, and it's been also really meaningful. But I also miss being part of something as thick and powerful as what I had when I was leading a community. So I would say it's been a challenge. I feel like I haven't found the perfect balance of what works for me. I think I've gone back and forth, and all of it's been rich, but it's a challenge, I think, when we're Jewish communal professionals to find that right balance.
Thank you, Josh. Sarah?
Thank you. Eric, again, thank you for having me here. And honestly, thank you all for coming to Baltimore. It is exciting to welcome so many professionals and to be part of this conversation and to actually answer this question in Baltimore, where I live. And I want to reflect, I said this to somebody I just saw this morning, that in the last 24 hours, in many ways, I've seen more people than I've seen in the last 24 months in the Jewish community working for a national organization, but no longer being a professional in the Jewish community here. But it is hard. It's hard as a Jewish communal professional, if I'm honest, to carve out that time to have a distinct Jewish community that feels different than your day-to-day work, right? I don't think any of us think of these jobs as 9 to 5, right? Nobody punches a clock and goes home. So really, where does that, community start and stop? What means personal? And I really was reflecting, what does community mean for me? And I do feel really lucky to be in a community like Baltimore, where it doesn't take seeking out a formal space to find Jewish community. It means walking into the Starbucks at the Quarry, for those of you who know, or being in the space where almost every day I'm running into somebody else in which I'm feeling a sense of connection and they're feeding my community. So much of what has been part of my community is really those meaningful personal connections, but it is hard to find space to build community intentionally as a Jewish communal professional.
So there was method to this madness, as you can probably tell. We have a distinguished foundation professional, a Hillel professional, but at the national system level. And then we have the CEO of a local Jewish federation, perhaps the most visible Jewish public figure locally in your community. How do you have a personal Jewish life?
First of all, I want to echo Mark. It's amazing to look out here and see 1,300 Jewish professionals and know that we're all together in this work. I want to talk about some of the challenges. I spent the first part of my career in New York working for a national organization, and so my community was separate from my job because my job was with people from all over the country. And when I, a decade later, moved to Detroit, I realized that it's harder when your work is intermingled. But I also learned a lot about belonging. And I learned a lot about the fact that I moved to Detroit when I was in my 30s. And as a single woman, there was a lot of space for me as a professional, but the community part of it, if I wanted to step out of my job, wasn't really set up for single women. It's set up for couples and children, and I've seen that now as moving to Milwaukee, that for women and couples without children, our community institutions aren't set up for it. And so I've both had to learn how to make friends as adults and learn how to be in visible positions and try to build a small network of people who are work, but I could also have real Jewish community with. But I've also learned a lot about the work that we do in community and belonging, and how deeply I felt my own sense of belonging as a single woman or then as a couple without children, and realizing that there's so many other communities that I'm not a part of and don't notice how difficult it is to enter that space.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for being willing to share openly about this question, because it's definitely something I know that's on the minds of everybody who works in the Jewish professional field. But now let's turn to the professional side of community. I'm going to stay with you, Miriam. You are in charge of the Milwaukee Jewish community, responsible for the Milwaukee Jewish community. You work for the Jewish community. What does that mean to you? How do you think about it? Is there a difference? Is serving the Jewish community different than building the Jewish community?
So I think serving the Jewish community and building the Jewish community mean the same things and different things depending on the moment. I think that we talked a little bit about crisis work right before here. And I think that these last 5 years, from COVID to Ukraine to a war in Israel again, antisemitism, for me, it has meant so much to be on the side of being in it, being involved in the work, knowing I'm doing something, knowing that I'm making that change. But I think it's really important for us to recognize, first of all, as professionals, that not everybody's in it all day long, and we get great satisfaction and we know all the details, but it's really hard, and we have to keep that in mind as we're thinking about the balance of building and serving, right? What are the needs of the Jewish people? What is a vibrant Jewish future? And where we spend our time and energy.
Sarah, as you know well, because we had the privilege of working together, I had some experience working at Hill International. And so I am curious how you think about community professionally. Are we talking about the communities on campus? Are we talking about the communities of parents? Are we talking about who we serve? How do you think about community?
Yeah, I think first off, it's a great question, even thinking about the serving and building specifically, and really kind of relates to this, what you're asking, Eric. You know, we have to start fundamentally, who are we trying to build a community around and connection to? And when we think about our movement, we do think expansively. Both we think about the students at the core, right? Who are we trying to serve? And then who is the ecosystem around them, right? Both the professionals, the communities we live in, and for our Hillel professionals, that means on their home campuses, they are engaging in a really broad sense of the word community. And of course, in the past 19 months, the whole community has wanted to be part of our work. And so what does that mean and look like? And we've really had to think about balancing the distinction of what is serving versus building, and how much time and energy we're at times putting into that service mentality. How much time are we reacting to what is urgent or the crisis of the moment? And it will come as no surprise that we've spent a lot of time on campus thinking about crisis in the last 19 months. But we've also spent equal amount of time really intentionally thinking about building community, and really starting with the answer to that question, that first and foremost, we want to build community for the students we're trying to serve. And so we've spent last summer, we took a pause actually to say we wanted to have a posture of coming into this academic year really intentionally building community and not just serving or reacting. What did our students need and want from us? And just like JFNA, we have really done a ton of research in this space, and we surveyed 4,000 students to say, what are you looking for when it means to come to Hillel to be part of a Jewish community? And how can we build around those needs? So for us, really, it is, of course, at the core of the students, and then we think about the broader sense of what it means to build community in different circles and different ecosystems.
Thank you. So Josh is a foundation professional and certainly one of the most prominent foundations in Jewish life. How do you think about building and serving community?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I mean, the first thing I would say is that I think from the privilege of being able to look expansively across what happens in the Jewish community, it is not a Jewish community, it is Jewish communities. And the truth is that when we look across the work, I see so many opportunities for community, whether it's in this Moishe house or on this campus or even in this one class or this one, local youth group or a birthright bus, whatever it may be. All of these are opportunities for community building. And those are the communities that that's how people experience Jewish community, is in these kind of more intimate settings, some of which are a bit more ephemeral and some of which last years or even decades. And when I think about my work, I think about us being in service of the community builders, right? Because at the center of every one of those communities are people who are bringing people together. Many of those community builders are sitting in this room, and this is, sacred, holy work that we do. And the opportunity is to figure out how to invest in those folks so that they can build amazing communities that will thrive. And I would just add that part of those communities are communities of young people or communities of learners, and part of that is also communities of professionals. And there's a bunch of community builders in this room who are helping build the community that is this room. And that's critical work that we do too, because the more we can kind of thicken our professional communities, the deeper we can go in our work.
And just to go a step further, we use the word building. Builders need materials, and they have plans, and they have extra workers who may have to work overtime to get the building built on time and meet the deadlines. As a foundation professional, you're thinking about what actually goes into the building process and how you can support that.
I mean, 100%, right? Behind every community builder is a set of, as you were saying, kind of a whole infrastructure that supports that to happen, whether it's the fundraisers or the operational folks or, just so much required behind the scenes to make it happen. And yeah, all those who make donations or in the funding business, it's not enough just to fund that one person who's doing the physical programmatic work. We have to support everything, and that's why general operating and multi-year support and all of that is so critical to actually seeing the work happen.
Terrific. You can applaud that. That's good. So let's start looking forward, as we promised we would. Sarah, where's the greatest potential for our work in building and sustaining, serving community today, but looking into the future? What should we be excited about? What's our potential?
First, I just love that we're starting with talking about the positive. I really think that it's so important that we do think of the rich opportunity that we have in this moment. And really, this surge that we're seeing, right, that we are seeing on campus, we have engaged more students in the past 19 months than we've engaged in all of the 100-year, each year more than the last 100 years of Hillel's history. And really this opportunity is to build and strengthen Jewish identity now that will carry us to the future. And we think particularly around this opportunity to help young people see how they can not only consume community, but create it. And there's a really rich opportunity of people coming forward to say, what does it mean to be a leader in today's Jewish community? And how can we think as a communal sector more expansively about what leadership means, right? It's not just about formal titles that you hold or roles that you play. It's actually about what are the skill sets, what are the competencies you need to not only be coming to or stepping into community, but really creating for yourself and for your peers. And we see so much rich opportunity, not only in the students we serve, but in the connections we make with organizations that so many of whom are represented in this room, where we're helping build that ecosystem and letting young people find not only their place in community, but how to lead it.
What are you excited about for your community, Miriam?
So I think the greatest potential is to think less oi, more joy, right? We've heard a lot about the surge in Jewish life. We've heard a lot about people coming together, and we also know there's this big dark cloud. There's this big dark cloud about what it means to be Jewish. And one of the things I've been saying publicly now is, if we spent the same amount of money on sending more people to camp than we were on security, and we need security, right? If we spent that, the potential for the Jewish future is much more secure. We have to make sure that we are investing in all ages in the positive experiences of what it means to be Jewish, in order to make sure that in 5 and 10 and 30 years we have a Jewish community.
What are you experiencing, the same or different?
I mean,
Josh?
Candidly, my colleague said it all. I thought it was really beautiful. I love that you started with Vishinantam Levanecha and thinking about teaching. I completely agree that if we're looking for hope, and it was said before on this stage, that our young people can give us that, and we have an opportunity to teach them what it's like to be in community, give them the confidence to feel like they want that and they know how to build that, and then the tools to make that happen. And it just sort of sets us up for a really bright future. And I feel like I also want to mention that, when we collectively, all the work that we do across the community, we are reaching millions of the 6-7 million Jewish young people across this country. And there's also all the young people and all the Jewish folks who have not opted into what it is that we're offering. And I think we have also a really interesting opportunity in this moment to listen carefully to those who are not opting in for Jewish life because they're on the margins or because they haven't thought about it, and to learn and design and help them figure out and how they might want to create Jewish community for themselves as well.
So from your perch at a foundation where you get to see many of the plans of many of the organizations working in this space, do you feel that we're, as a general matter, taking good advantage of this moment, of the potential? We've heard the surge, we've heard engagement, or do you have things that you could urge us to do as we look forward even more?
Yeah, I want to say both and, right? I want to say we are doing remarkable work, right? And we have swung open our doors to try to make room for all the folks who have wanted to opt into Jewish life, and we have the evidence that not only are they signaling interest, but they're actually coming. Sarah shared what's happening on campus. We see it in terms of people wanting to volunteer in Israel and people wanting to, participate in Jewish life in new kinds of ways. And there is absolutely more for us to be doing. And it requires, candidly, some cases it just requires more resources to get more boots on the ground and folks who are able to do the engagement. It's more training for folks to do peer-to-peer type learning so that we can mobilize people that way. And it requires a certain level of creativity that we have in us, but we haven't fully realized. And I think there's a huge amount of opportunity around that too.
Great. Well, we thank you for your leadership in that challenge. And speaking of challenge, so we're talking about the potential, but obviously there are challenges that we face in realizing the potential. There's a surge, but there's polarization. There's people wanting to be involved, but we may not have enough slots or enough openings or enough boots on the ground. From your perspective, let's start with you, Sarah. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges?
I sort of want to pick up where Miriam left in the last question. We could spend the entire panel talking about the challenges, the deep polarization, sometimes what we feel is a lack of allyship. But the reality is, I think the greatest challenge we have right now is not investing enough in the real joy part of Judaism, not investing enough in the opportunity that this moment is presenting to not only create the Jewish community that we currently have on campus and in our communities, but to actually open our doors wide enough to invite all of those who want to step in. And I think that there's just, Josh mentioned resources, and of course we need to be investing more, but really if we don't invest the resources in the spaces that are really lifting up the joy, and make sure that we certainly need to address the OI, but that we spend the vast majority of our time in that space of building and strengthening community, we just risk missing the moment.
Miriam, what are the challenges that you face in your community to realize this positive vision you've laid out for us?
My team in Milwaukee has heard me say this every day at every meeting. We wake up every day with 3 priorities: safety and security of the Jewish community, and that includes fighting antisemitism. The second is making sure that's not the only experience of Jewish life, what I referenced about Jewish joy. And the third is staying grounded in this moment, talking about how we are not just the most polarized, but everyone is emotional about everything, and the topic that they're going to be emotional about, we're not prepared for. And the challenge is that we have the ideas, and I know that if we had the 100 people doing 1,000 things, or 1,000 people with 100 ideas, we'll come up with the ideas. One of the emotional parts for the Jewish community, besides for everything politics, Israel, what we think of is the fact that we want to do all this and we don't want to give anything else up. And so the time of trying to implement while there's so many sacred cows is a challenge for us as professionals of trying to navigate that, to prioritize, to put the resources, and to really affect change in that way.
Anything to add on challenges, Josh?
Yeah, you mentioned polarization, Eric, and I just want to, I think a real challenge for us is that we are living in this broader society that is experiencing all of this infighting and disagreement and polarizations and taking sides and othering. And I think we know as a Jewish community that that's not who we are, that we have a long tradition of arguing for the sake of heaven, machloket b'shem shemayim. We have a long tradition of believing in b'tselem Elohim, that we're all created in one image, and that there are outside forces trying to sort of push us off our values, but that we have a wonderful opportunity. It's sort of countercultural now to say that we want to, see everybody for who they are and, respectfully disagree. And the opportunity for us is to lean into our values and not be sucked into what the outside world wants us to do, and have the Jewish world be a place where people can come and have those conversations and feel safe and feel comfortable and feel included and feel like they belong, where the rest of the outside world isn't making space for that. So I think it's both a challenge and a huge opportunity for us if we can do it right.
That's terrific. So here's the hard question. We've been building up to this. So first I'm going to share with our listeners on the Glue that before we began this podcast, we've been discussing here at this conference the fact that we are at the midpoint of the decade. And the 5 years that began this decade have been years of a great challenge: COVID and Ukraine and antisemitism and Israel and a variety of other, October 7th, a variety of other major challenges. But as we've said, our goal in this conversation is to look ahead the next 5 years. So let me ask you to do that. 2030, we're in year 2030. What does the Jewish community that you're working to build look like? And what is the role that we all can play, both on this panel, and again, I'll remind our listeners of the Glue that we're sitting in a room of 1,300 Jewish professionals from across the full range of Jewish community. What's their role to play in helping fulfill the vision that you have of 2030? I'll let you decide who wants to go first.
Remember October 9th, right? Every community in America was gathered. And there were more people in that room than ever gathered in our community, and the logos didn't matter. The brand was Jewish. I'm quoting Scott Kaufman, wherever you are, right? The brand was Jewish. We all had a Jewish star on. Shout out to Scott. We all had a Jewish star on. We all knew why we were there together. We felt more connected to each other in our community and around the world. And my hope for the future is that all of us think about the brand being Jewish, that the logos don't matter, that we need to come together and figure out how to move our communities together. And it's really easy to say, but we all work for different organizations. And I think each person in this room and each person listening has the opportunity to think about the winner and loser is never an organization, it's the Jewish community. And if we got there in 2030, 2035, there's a Talmud that argues for many years, and we're still studying it, so it might take a while, but getting to that sense that the brand is Jewish and we'll all be better if that's the focus, that will make 2030 pretty special.
Wonderful.
So, I think particularly our work at Hillel, we're always thinking about, right, what is our customer base changes basically every 4 years, really every year. But at 2030, we're going to be engaging and welcoming a new generation, Generation Alpha, onto campus. And Generation Z will be amongst this room as one of our core Jewish communal professionals as well. And so what are the experiences that those individuals have had, and how are we going to be able to learn and build from them? And so part of what I hope is that in 5 years, we'll be able to take the lessons that particularly many of our young people on campus today who will be part of our Jewish communal professional ranks in less than 60 days for many of them, the skills that they've learned, right? They've learned to be resilient. They've learned that community is more important than anything else. they've learned that it's hard sometimes to be Jewish, and that's okay, right? It's okay for them to understand that and to make them feel a deeper sense of connection to each other. So what I hope is actually that we are able to take the next 5 years and really build from the strength and place that we're in today, and to really be able to continue to say that we're going to innovate for the future, and that we're constantly trying to build a stronger and more connected fabric, and that we're doing it together. And so I'll just answer one specific question of how everyone in this room can help us get there. And we think about this and do this work already at Hillel with many of you. It really is about creating intentional connection between each of the different groups that we all engage, right? It's not about who I'm engaging as a teen or who I'm engaging in college. It's about how are we creating a continuum or a collection of experiences that move people on a journey, and how are we working as professionals to make sure that we're connecting that work to each other. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to be thinking differently. And Miriam, I really appreciate how you said not only is it a Jewish brand, right, that Jewish is the brand, that we as Jewish communal professionals are breaking down our silos and thinking differently about our work.
Josh, 2030.
Yeah, I want to lift up again what my colleagues shared. Maybe I'll add to that we talk all the time at my day job about investing in Jewish learning, not because it's sort of the way to perpetuate Judaism for its own sake, but because it enriches our lives in such a powerful way. We talk about, Jewish learning that leads to connection and meaning and purpose, which was so on point to understand the theme of this conference is on purpose. And I feel like when we get distracted by everything going on in the world and all of our challenges as a community, it's easy to get lost into the surviving and lose track of the thriving. But fundamentally, it's the opportunity to engage in Judaism in ways that enrich our lives. That is what draws, I think, all of us to our work, and is ultimately going to draw other people to want to get in touch with their own Judaism or find out about it or connect with community in whatever way they want. And yeah, my wish for 2030 is that we can all lean into that to the point where people are actually flocking to their involvement in Jewish community because they know it is a place that's going to fill up their spiritual cups, their personal cups, their community cups, to help them live better and more meaningful lives and make contributions to the world that they want to make. And what's my advice for all of us to do that is we have to invest some time into doing our own learning and to talking about these things and to finding our own practices that are meaningful to us. We open by discussing how it is to sort of find Judaism in our own lives. I know how hard it is for us as Jewish communal professionals sometimes to do that, but that is the work that fuels all of us, I think, to stay in it. So I want to invite us to double down on our own learning and our own exploration so that we can bring that out into the world and the work that we do.
Well, I thank you for the inspiring vision. I want to thank Josh Miller, and I want to thank Sarah Fried, and I want to thank Miriam Rosenzweig for their inspiration, for their hard work, and for doing the work, as is everybody in this audience. So that's it for this episode of The Glue. Thanks for tuning in. The Glue is executive produced by Elis and produced by Charlie Freedman. Look for our next episode in about a month. To make sure you don't miss it, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast. If you have any comments or feedback, please write to us at podcast@jewishfederations.org. And of course, there are so many ways you can play a part in being the glue that holds your community together. There is no wrong way to start. Volunteer, get involved. If we can help, you can find us at www.jfeds.org/theglue. I'm Eric Fingerhut, and I'll catch you next time on The Glue.